Hello my sweet angel besties, welcome back to our first wrap up of 2024, which is crazy. I feel like this year is already going so fast. I saw a lot of people be like, January went so slow, but I disagree. I feel like this year is already flying by and it's scaring me. So if we could all just take a step back and slow down, I would greatly appreciate it. In terms of reading, honestly, I didn't have a great reading month in January. I didn't have a single 5-star read, which was really sad, except for rereads. And I was also just feeling so slumpy in January. When I was getting all of the books together to show you guys, I was actually shocked at how much I read. I thought I read way less because I was feeling so slumpy, but honestly, audiobooks really came to save the day this month. Whilst I had no or little motivation to pick up a physical book and read a physical book, I did have a lot of motivation to just listen to audiobooks while I was driving and crocheting and doing other little tasks, cleaning and stuff like that. I love audiobooks. I always have, I always will, but I feel like this month especially, or in January especially, they just really were my saving grace. So I have 10 books to talk about this month, and let's just jump straight into it, shall we? I might go in the order that I read these books. So the first book that I finished in 2024 was Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce her last name. This was a book club pick for my little friend group from December, but we all read it in early January because for some reason we just all put it off in December. This is the start of a YA fantasy series. This was super popular quite a few years ago. I feel like it was one of the OG Book Talk books, but I never read it. And I was honestly pretty excited to pick this up, especially because at the end of last year, I read Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and that was one of my favorite books of the year. So freaking good. And the author of Powerless said that she got a lot of inspiration from Red Queen and a couple of other books as well. And so that made me even more excited to pick this up. So when it was chosen for my book club, I was pretty excited to pick it up and see what I thought of it. This was released in 2015, I want to say. Yeah, 2015. And I think if I had read it a few years ago, I would have been utterly obsessed. But unfortunately, just reading it now, I didn't connect. I feel like everything that happened in this book, I have just seen in so many other fantasy books. And again, if I'd read it earlier in my fantasy reading journey, I probably would have been obsessed and so surprised and just been oh my gosh, this is crazy. But it just felt so predictable to me. Every single thing that happened, I knew it was coming. Again, just because I've seen it happen in other fantasy books, and that is not this book's fault. It's only just because I've read other books that include the same thing. Even though this one might have come out before the other books that I've read, you know what I mean? It was just when I read it that probably didn't do it any favors. I'm sorry if you can hear construction going on in the background. It literally goes all day. So I can't film this when it's quiet because this is the sound that I have in the background all day. So sorry. In saying that, I still enjoyed this. It was still a good time. I enjoyed my reading experience. I think I ended up giving it, what did I rate it? I think I might have told the girls in book club that I rated it maybe a 4 or 3.75, but I think after thinking about it more, I'm gonna give it a 3.5 because it was good. I enjoyed it. I had fun. I think my main critiques is that, like I said, it didn't really do anything new for me, and on top of that, I didn't really feel connected to any of the characters. And if you don't feel connected to the characters, it's really hard to just really dive in and be obsessed with the book. So 3.5. It was still good. I had fun. I just kind of got to the end and I was nice. But I haven't thought about it since. And will I continue the series? Here's the thing. Maybe. Am I dying to? Not really. But can I see myself picking up the second book? Maybe. The second book that I read in January was Winter by Marissa Meyer. Now, I just want to show you how thick this book is. I started this in December and I didn't finish it until January, obviously, because she is big. And honestly, being partly in a slump while trying to read this is probably not your best idea. I ended up reading a lot of this through audiobook because I was slumping. This is over 800 pages, which is crazy because the rest of the series is significantly shorter than this. This is the last book in the Lunar Chronicles, and I honestly had a lot of fun with that series. I read most of it in December and then obviously finished the last book in January. So if you want to see my thoughts on the rest of the series, you can watch my December wrap up because I talked about it a bit more in that video. But the series is really fun because because it's YA sci-fi, and each book follows a different female main character, and they are all like fairy tale retellings. So you have a retelling of Cinderella, a retelling of Rapunzel, a retelling of Red Riding Hood, and this one is a retelling of, or reimagining, sorry, of Snow White. There's a lot of political intrigue, there's a lot of romance, a lot of action. Like, the series is honestly very fun, and I definitely recommend it. I think I would have enjoyed it more if I'd read it when I was a little bit younger, because it is YA, so it's not aimed at someone in their mid-20s, but I still had fun with it. I think I ended up giving this book like a 4 or a 4.25, maybe a 4, because I had a lot of fun with it. I don't think it needed to be as long as it was, but there was also like a lot to wrap up in this book. Like, we had a lot of storylines with a lot of different characters, and you get to see all of their stories kind of conclude in this book, while still being introduced to our Snow White kind of character and following her storyline. It's honestly very good. Like, I feel like Marissa Meyer did a really fantastic job, but yeah, it's long. So I think I did just kind of lose interest a little bit during part of it, but that's probably my only critique. Next, I read The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. This has been on my TBR for so long, I think since 2021, and this is my 4th Lisa Jewell book. I didn't hate this, but I didn't really like it. I think the more I reflect on it, the more I'm like, yeah, it was there and it existed and I read it and it was fine, but I have like I feel very indifferent towards it. So I think I originally rated it 3, but I think I'm gonna go back and give it 2.5, because the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, yeah, it was fine. And I think I've decided that Lisa Jewell is just not really an author for me. I've read 4 of her books now. 2 of them I think I rated 4 stars, and then 2 of them I've rated like 2.5. And even the ones that I've read that were 4 stars still kind of like just made me feel not great. Like, I feel like she has this very like dark underlying feeling to her books, and I just don't think it's for me. They just feel a bit like eerie and a bit like icky, and I just don't like feeling like that when I read, and so I just don't think her books are for me. So I think I'm probably not going to pick them up as much. This book was like interesting, and like it kept me interested most of the way through. I definitely got bored during it. Like, it wasn't bad, it wasn't like terrible. I just feel like I didn't like it enough to give it 3 stars, so 2.5 kind of feels right to me. Basically, this book is about a family that lives in this house. It kind of gives a bit culty sort of vibes. Like, there's one member that kind of moves into this house that kind of starts controlling the narrative quite a lot and kind of acting like this like leader and kind of like, everyone do what I say. And there are these kids growing up in this house that are experiencing this. You're following multiple different characters who are doing multiple different things, but they're all linked together, which that was interesting to me. And you're also doing a then and now timeline, so you're jumping forward and back. And whilst it was like messy, you could still follow it. It wasn't like really hard to follow, but I definitely didn't feel connected to any of the characters, which is not crazy for a thriller. Like, I feel like that's pretty normal for a thriller. But there were a lot of bad things happening to these characters, and I feel like if you don't care about the characters, you don't really feel that strongly about what's happening. So like I said, overall I feel quite indifferent towards it, wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it, but I can see like why other people enjoy it. Like, I can see why it is a good book to other people. It just wasn't one for me. Next up, I did my rereads of Crescent City. I read these books for the first time January last year. You can go back and watch my reading vlog if you would like. I'll try and remember to link it down below if you want to see like my original thoughts and reactions and things like that. But obviously with Crescent City 3 coming out, I really wanted to do a reread, especially because these books are complicated. Like, there's a lot going on in these. There's a lot of info dumping, and Sarah J Maas is a very complex writer, but in the best way possible. Like, she really just like leaves little Easter eggs and leaves like tiny little pieces of information buried in a pretty mundane scene. So like, maybe there'll be one scene where there's not a crazy amount happening, maybe a bit of banter between characters, but there's like one sentence that is such important information that you don't realize until later. She is just an absolute mastermind when it comes to writing her books, and so I definitely knew that I wanted to do a reread before going into Crescent City 3, and I'm so glad that I did, because the first time reading these books, I was very much just like grasping what the story was, who the characters were, what the world was, and like how things worked. And the second time reading it, I feel like I was able to really understand like those really small details that I didn't get the first time. In saying that, I probably could do a reread another time and I'd pick up even more, but I'm just really glad that I did, because I feel a lot more confident going into the third book, and I feel like I got a much better understanding of the characters and the world and the dynamics and things like that upon this reread, because the first time I was kind of struggling. Like I was just kind of like trying to gather pieces of information as I went and like trying to connect the puzzle pieces. But the second time I felt like I could really enjoy the story and really like connect with the characters more. But I feel like the side characters in these books are what I really enjoy. Like I enjoy the side characters way more than I enjoy the main characters. So I'm very intrigued to see what Crescent City 3 will be like. If you have read the end of the second book, you know exactly what I'm referring to. I cannot wait to see how the story continues and like what on earth is going to happen. Like I have no idea and I'm so excited. But yeah, I did my reread of these two, both of them 5 stars, absolutely incredible. Next up, I read Love Redesign by Lauren Asher. This took me so long to go through because I was definitely in like the height of my slump, I think, when I was reading this. So do I think that impacted my reading experience? Yes, I do. Would I have rated it higher if I read it at a different point in time? Potentially. I ended up rating this like a 3.75/4 star, probably leaning towards a 4 star. Like it was really good. I really enjoyed it. This is a brand new series by Lauren Asher. Lakefront Billionaires is the name of the series. So obviously the first book is out, the rest of them are coming. And I feel like Lauren Asher is one of those authors where I'm not like obsessed with her books, but I do quite enjoy them. Like for the most part, I have a good time reading her books, but they're not like my absolute favorites of all time. I feel like her writing is just so easy to just like fly through. I feel like my brain just likes her writing. Like I feel like I can just kind of like not even try and the pages just like fly by, if that makes sense. Like you don't even have to try when you're reading her books, which is just really nice when you want something just easy and fun. In this book, we're following Julian and Dahlia. Their mums are best friends and they are kind of enemies. They have history in terms of like holding grudges against each other for certain things that happened, and they haven't seen each other for a while, and they end up back together in the same small town, and then they end up kind of just being in a lot of situations together. It's a lot of fun, it's a lot of banter, there's a lot of like funny scenes. I don't think this book needed to be as long as it was. I think it's about 500, yeah, over 500 pages for a romance book. Not my favorite. I don't love a long romance book unless it's Magnolia Parks, honestly, or probably like Binding 13. But I really enjoyed the dynamics between our main characters and I really liked the romance that built. But yeah, it wasn't as much of a favorite as I thought it might be, because I know some people absolutely adore this book and I just didn't have that same kind of connection, but it was good, it was fun. Then we have The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. I think this might be my favorite book that I've read this month, which is honestly quite surprising because this is a spin-off slash continuation of the Threads of Power series by V.E. Schwab, which I read last year and didn't love. I've read maybe like 5 books, 6 books maybe by V.E. Schwab now, and I think the Threads of Power series by them is my least favorite. It wasn't bad by any means. Like I enjoyed the series. It's a trilogy, by the way, but it just wasn't my favorite. Like I just didn't really feel connected. In saying that, a lot of people absolutely adore that trilogy, so I might be in the minority with like where I stand on that series, but I just didn't feel like it did anything crazy for me. It was mostly just like between 3 and 4 stars each of those books in the original trilogy, so still very much enjoyed them. They just weren't like absolute favorites for me, weren't standouts for me. So I was a bit hesitant going into this book because I was like, oh, I didn't love the original series. Like, what am I going to think about this like spin-off? But I really, really liked it. I just had a great time. I really liked the characters in this book. I feel like it was written very, very well. I do think V.E. Schwab just writes beautifully and just has incredible concepts for their books. I will say in this book there are a lot of characters and there are multiple storylines going on, so there were a few times where it felt a little bit messy just because there was so much going on and so many different people that you're trying to follow and connect their storylines together, but I still had fun with it. I listened to this as an audiobook and it was a great audiobook, definitely recommend. And if you've read the original trilogy, I definitely recommend reading this. If you haven't read the original trilogy, I would hesitate to recommend this because I know it's a spin-off, so I know that maybe you don't technically have to read the original trilogy, but it is very heavily connected to the original Shades of Magic series. You're following the same characters plus a few new characters, but it's the same magic system, the same world building, and I feel like you'll have a much easier time understanding what's going on in this book if you have read the original trilogy, because whilst they do a great job of explaining a little bit of what's going on, like world building and things like that, I would say it's more of like a reminder rather than world building. Like, it doesn't explain everything in depth like it does in the original books, but it kind of reminds you. So if you've read them, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's how it worked, and like that's who's who, and that's this character, and that's the political situation. But I don't know if you'd be confused if you were just going straight into this. So I would say read the original books before you read this, but also who am I to tell you what to do? You know what I'm saying? Then we have Hidden Waters by Catherine Cowles. This is the third book in the Tattered and Torn series, which is a small town romance series, interconnected standalones. I really like this series. I think it is just like your classic interconnected standalone small town series. So like, I wouldn't go in expecting the most mind-blowing, world-changing, heartbreaking romances to ever exist, but these are just like exactly what they need to be. Like, I think if you read a lot of small town romances, you might like know what I mean when I say that. Like, if you just want a classic short little small town romance where you're connected to the characters, has a bit of a suspense, like mystery element to it, like these books are definitely for you. I don't want to call them palette cleansers because I think they're better than palette cleansers, but if you want like a good palette cleanser, if that makes sense. Like, for me personally, I feel like I've not been in a huge romance mood. Like, I'm not like finding myself wanting to read a lot of romance. So these are perfect for me because I'll read a few fantasy or sci-fi or whatever else I might be reading, and then read these in between, and they're just like the perfect kind of like hit of a romance, like short and sweet, still have depth to them, not too cringy. I just really like them. I think this one was my favorite out of the series so far. I mean, I've only read 3 and there are 5 in this particular series. I mean, Catherine Cowles has other books obviously, but this book follows Addie, and I really liked Addie. She is a character that we saw earlier in the series, and I've really enjoyed following her storyline as a side character in the other books, and then now as a main character in this book. I feel like I can relate a lot to her. I just loved her personality and seeing her character development, and the romance was just good too. Like, it was just what it needed to be. I think I gave this 4 stars because, like I said, it just did what it needed to do. It was exactly what I was expecting from it. It's not, like I said, the most incredible romance of all time, but I love these books and I can't wait to continue the series. Then we have Betting on You by Lynn Painter. This is Lynn Painter's newest YA romance. I do definitely prefer her YA romances over her adult romances, but that's just like a personal preference thing. In saying that though, I think this might be my least favorite out of her YA romances, which is such a shame because I was really looking forward to this one, but it just didn't stand out to me. It definitely wasn't bad. I think I'm gonna give it 3 stars. Like, I enjoyed it, I had fun with it, but I found it cringy at times. I didn't like love our characters. Like, I didn't feel super connected to them. Definitely didn't dislike them. I just kind of felt indifferent towards them. And this story is a bit of a, I want to call it like frenemies to friends to lovers. Like, the characters kind of get off on the wrong foot. I wouldn't call them enemies by any means, but they definitely don't get along when they first meet, and then they kind of just find themselves in the same environment, same situation multiple times, and just by proximity they obviously get to know each other a bit better, and they start off not liking each other, but they obviously become more friendly as the book progresses, and then, as I'm sure you can imagine, it becomes a romance by the end of the book. But I just think I preferred them as friends. I think they were really good friends, and I enjoyed the like scenes between them more. When they were friends, I felt a bit like cringed out when they were having their like romantic scenes, and I just didn't get it. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, you know when you read books like this, like a romance book, and they're like having these romantic scenes and you're just kind of like, no. That's how I felt with this book. Like, I just didn't see the chemistry, but I enjoyed it. It was fine. I'm not mad that I read it. I think I just have really high expectations because I just want something that is gonna make me feel like better than the movies made me feel. Like, is it too much to ask for? I just want to feel like I felt when I read better than the movies. Like, I want the rom-com feeling. I want the giddy like butterflies in my stomach, and I just didn't get that from this. I'm so sorry, Lynn Painter. I wish I did, but I just didn't. And the last book that I read this month was The Book You Want Everyone You Love to Read by Philippa Perry. This is my book club pick for January. So if you are in my book club, please click out of the video now. I specifically am talking about this book last so that you can click off and not miss anything else. But please don't watch this. You'll ruin book club if you do, and I'm gonna be mad at you if you ruin book club. Anyways, this was our book club pick for January. It is a non-fiction book and I liked it, but it just didn't do much for me at all. It's pretty short. It's like just over 200 pages, which is really nice. And it just talks a lot about relationships. It talks about how you perceive relationships, how other people perceive relationships, kind of like attachment style type of things. But I think overall, I just didn't feel any kind of way after reading this. Like, it didn't really give me anything new. And I haven't read like a crazy amount of nonfiction books, but I have read a few. So maybe that's why, like, if you haven't read any nonfiction books, maybe you'd really enjoy this. But it just didn't feel like it was teaching me anything very useful that I haven't heard before. Like, I feel like I've kind of seen it all before. So it talks about how we love, how we argue, how we change, and how we find contentment. So it was like interesting, but again, it just felt like reminders of things that I've read in other self-helpy kind of books like this before. And it felt quite surface level. Like, it felt like it was trying to touch on a lot of different topics, but not go very deep into anything. Like, it was almost like, let me touch a little bit on this, a little bit on this, a little bit on this, but not really go into anything very deeply. So I think I just wanted more from it. I don't not recommend it. Like, I think it would be good for some people, and I'm not mad that I read it. Like, I enjoyed it. It was good and it was interesting, and I think it'll lead to a very interesting discussion for book club, which is what I'm really looking forward to, because we haven't had our discussion yet. But it wouldn't be on like my top 10 nonfiction book recommendations. Like, I wouldn't go out of my way to be like, oh my gosh, everyone needs to read this. Like, it didn't feel like that. So do with that what you will. I think some people would really enjoy it, and I'm very intrigued to see what the other girls thought when we get to book club. But for me, it was just like, yeah, that was good. Moving on. You know, I don't know if I rate nonfiction or not. I'd probably give it like 3.5 maybe a 3. I don't know. But those are all of the books that I have to talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about all of the books that I read in January. Here's to hoping that February is a much better reading month in terms of just like how I feel about books. Like, let's try and get some 5-star reads in here. Like, pretty please. I just want some 5-star reads. I really miss that like obsessed feeling that you get after you read a really great book, or while you're reading a really good book. I just haven't had that feeling in like probably a couple months now, and I'm missing it. I'm really missing it. I would love to know what your favorite book that you read in January was. Like, please feel free to give me all the recommendations, because I need some. Apparently I need some 5-star recommendations. But I love you guys so much. I hope you have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.